Well, I'm gonna jump right in because this is that session on the last day, right before lunch, and people are probably sitting with a brain full of content from workshops on the first day, sessions on day one, day two, probably great socializing with some peers out and about and around the conference. But also thank you all for being here, for taking a little bit of time to hear about me, to hear about why this session's important. And I think the one I'm looking at from the most interesting part is, well, how do we actually plan for the stuff that's unexpected? Because isn't it unexpected? And then I have some of these stories that I want to share just from my own experiences of what are those actual stories from the unexpected? What have been those weird things that have happened? To wrap up with some Q&A, and then hopefully I think this will be structured so that if everyone here has something they want to share of one of those wacky stories and kind of what did you do with it? What did you learn from it? We can kind of learn from each other because I think that's what all these conferences are really great about. Myself, I'm Randy Saeks. I'm a network manager for a K-8 school district, kind of Midwest in the Chicagoland area. And I think probably for most of us here, if we're smaller school districts or just schools in general, we're usually wearing a lot of different hats. So it's not just going to be you're doing this one thing. It's, well, there's 1,200 students and all these staff members, and how do we make sure their devices work, and how do we make sure that people are actually physically safe? That's one of those interesting components that isn't techie, but it's going to be in here a couple of times with some of the content of sometimes you're not looking at devices so much, you're actually looking at the people. And one of those things is obviously really, really important to think about. I've been in education 24 years, doing a lot of things with systems integration, so rolling all the way back to like Mac OS 10.4 and making them talk to directory service systems that aren't really around anymore because that company doesn't exist. Anything that connects to networks nowadays. So I think before we all knew printers, computers, wireless access points, switches. Now there's components in there like safety and security related things, voice over IP phone systems, you have security cameras, you have analog paging components that need to make all these things work. And lastly, the other part that I've been lucky to do is be accepted into the Apple Distinguished Educator Program, which I absolutely love because I think that gives a really neat lens on the things that we're doing with technology and how that stuff is trying to give our students authenticity, agency, taking ownership of their own learning. So, hopefully we'll wrap all of these around here. Why is this session important? And I probably should have titled this slide, Why Did I Decide to Do This? I've seen more and more concentration of technology integration over many, many years, from kind of the iBooks that have the little carrying handles on them work on a cart that we have to wheel around to classrooms work, all the way into things with how do we notify people if there's an emergency that occurs. So kind of technology is touching more and more things. I think we see an increased importance of digital, emotional, and physical safety of all of our school community members. So not just our students, but our teachers, families that are involved. We see things that we're doing with parent outreach so that we can show, hey, here's some ways you can think about screen time at home. And that's focusing a lot more on that emotional well-being and just kind of wellness in general. Ever-increasing pace of technology, innovation, and change. There were, I believe, 3 sessions this year that had a component or in the title was something about AI. I don't know if there was a session last year on that. And I think that's a great example to see how change is just consistently happening more and more and faster, and how do we integrate this? How do we use it? How do we make sure it's being done in a responsible way? And then I also realized that the unexpected things that we talk about, they actually happen in life. And this was a great evening. It was about a month ago. I was catching a concert at the Salt Shed in Chicago, which is a great iteration to try to say at, luckily it wasn't the 9 a.m. early session, but fun evening. Good music, skylines behind you or over to the left side a little bit. You're wrapping up the day, you come back, and you see, hey, my car doesn't have a back passenger window anymore. Okay. Well, the unexpected things happen in life, and when you think about what does this scenario actually look like if you're focusing on outcomes and the systems we're designing, do I have a backup of my data on there? Because I'm actually thinking more so of, we back up data, we put it in place for schools so that we don't lose information. what happens when that happens in the real world because someone breaks into your car and steals a laptop? The other one I've realized is the unexpected things that happen. We can usually plan for them. We can kind of think, well, we want to make sure we have our data backed up. Most of these focus around the when that thing happens. It's not so much the condition itself. And it also was a great reminder, as I was putting these slides together and reflecting back on them a little bit, let's think about the people involved in these things as well. It's really easy from the tech lens to just focus on it works or it doesn't work and let's fix it. Sometimes there's people in there that are also involved, and we want to make sure we put them into consideration when working through all of this. So what can we do? Like, how do we plan for the things that we really don't know about? And again, kind of leaning back on those 24 years, the things I've seen, I was thinking, well, one of the first things we can do is we can focus on outcomes. And a great way to think about this is you might be at home and you say, you know what, I need to go get my car washed. If you think about that, instead of focusing directly on I need to go take it to the car wash and say, I just want to have a clean car at the end of the day. Sometimes that can change to I'm going to take it out of the garage because it's going to thunderstorm later. Anyone here maybe got a free car wash if you were around for the baseball game? Focusing on outcomes there, hey, I have a clean car. In the tech lane, some of the times if we do that, we don't necessarily have to worry about the specifics, the process, or the details. We can say, today I'm going to go hand wash it myself, or I'm being lazy, I'm going to go take it to the car wash. I want it detailed. I'm just going to let nature take care of it on its own. And that's a lot easier to design solutions for and to be ready to react towards than just saying, I need to think about how do I get to the car wash today, and what if there's a line, and you can kind of spiral out of control from there. I've also really embraced designing with change in mind. If you attended any of the macOS 26 sessions, and that idea of you can now reassign devices from your, I think it's device management server is the new term, instead of MDM server. Apple's kind of saying, hey, we recognize you might need to change a process. In that case, change your MDM or device management server. Plan for those things a little bit with how can we be really, really flexible if we have to make a change down the road. And I feel like those two pillars kind of that engineering secret sauce, and they take away that how do we do a thing, and they really just focus on, here's where I want to be at the end of the day. I don't care the steps that we take to get there. This one's really always important, I think. Have a way to undo whatever you're doing, or have a way to say, how do we leverage making it easy to make change to say, oh, we actually need to pull back this software update because it created an issue that is not great for our school environment. A way that I've undone things is every so often it's winter break or summer break or any of those times in schools where you say, I need to reconfigure or do something to a device. And what you don't really want to do is be at home, connected into a VPN, change a configuration on a router, and you say, I can't connect to this anymore. How do I undo that? Great ways, have a backup of that configuration before, obviously, you make that change. The other one I learned was you can do things like reload 15. Reload this router in 15 minutes, make all of those changes, and as long as you don't write the configuration before that time window expires, oops, I dropped my connection, I messed something up, that's fine, it's going to restart in 5 minutes, and it'll go back to where it was before making that change. And oddly, this was one that is kind of what I did on this entire presentation, iterate and reflect. So as you go through all of these changes, as you go through all of these fun situations, what worked well? First off, celebrate those wins when you can, because sometimes they don't happen enough. And in those moments, you can look and say, this is what made this really, really successful. How do we move it into another situation? And if something didn't work well, you can say, well, how would we maybe do this a little bit differently? So the format of what I'm going to do now is just kind of run through some of these unexpected issues, some of the key points I've seen from them, lesson learned, and then I hope there will be some shared laughs that come from some of these, because hopefully they're going to be those weird, unexpected events of, we really didn't think about that thing happening. So we're going to start out with, as we're in education here, focusing on K-12, we're going to start out with A for animals. And there should be some little kind of colored palettes on the bottom that kind of focus on those components of, was it an outcome, is it change, is it flexibility, is it reflection? There really is no digital version of the Tamagotchi ate my homework, and probably certain generations of you will completely get this joke. Others of you might go and look online like, what is he talking about? Animals can do lots of things. We've had students come in that have, an iPad that has, you can clearly see either a dog or a cat has been gnawing at the case, and somehow they pierce the screen. The other one that sometimes we run into with animals in schools is things get hungry. They eat copper, apparently, or they bite through something. I personally have had a mouse that has gnawed through one of the wires running to my outdoor AC unit at home, which turned into, it's the middle of summer, it's 95 degrees outside. Why is this unit not turning on? And if we kind of look back at that, well, what are the outcomes here? Well, when a student or a teacher or someone has an animal do something to a device, we're actually nowadays focusing a little bit less on the loss of data with all the cloud services that are there. So if we're all here in K-12, and we're all using our managed Apple accounts, we have that 200 gigabytes of storage space, please use it for these situations. Cloud services, so Google Workspace, O365, any of those other tools. Someone eats through a device, we're really focused more on just getting them a device that they can use back. B, we're going to talk here for a broken power supply, right? Everyone experienced one of those? Like, a computer doesn't turn on. Well, what happens when it's a broken power supply? We always know that things will eventually break, and it's that when that really, I think, is the unexpected part. And in this one, reflecting a little bit, well, what's the impact of hardware not turning on? All right, well, what's the piece of hardware that we're referring to? Is it a computer? Okay, we get another one. Is it a power supply and a switch that has, redundancy? We'll order another one, but it's fine because there's redundant power supplies to work around this. Well, what happens when that's an old ATX power supply in your Bell system that we really can't find a part for anymore? And you actually then have to research what are the voltages and amperages running over the wire pin pairs to make sure the modem port taking the phone call from your voice over IP system has the negative voltage so it can go on and off hook appropriately. That lens of timing, if this happens at 9 p.m., might not be an issue. If it happens at 2 p.m., might be an issue. In our case, what we did is we found the best place we could find to get old power supplies, which happened to be eBay. And our solution was, let's buy 2 of them because they're $30. And this one's going to fix the thing that we have right now. We're going to figure out how to retrofit it into this paging cabinet because it's not really the same form factor. And let's just have the other one on the shelf. So if this does happen again, it's not going to be an issue. The other part we found with this is, again, safety and security a little bit. If you're using your Bell systems, nowadays that's probably doing things like overhead paging. It's doing school announcements. It's probably going to be the conduit, if you were to have a lockdown in your building, a way to communicate that out. And we prevented that outage buying another one. Can you guess how many slides there are going to be based upon so far these first 3 letters? It's going to be 26. Cold temperatures. We learned this one being from the Midwest. Certain times you have things that are expected or unexpected based upon your geographic region. A great way to look at this is, I'm sure anyone that is in a coastal area worrying about hurricanes isn't thinking too much about blizzards and natural disasters. It's kind of like in Illinois, I'm not really thinking about, is there going to be a volcano eruption? So that geographic location, and that's why hopefully there'll be some time if you all share things, you have some perspective based upon where you are. So we learned in the Midwest, winter break, a device left in car is not a great thing when the temperatures get below 10 degrees. And then folks learn that the L in LCD stands for liquid. And if liquid gets too cold, it really doesn't like staying in its liquid form. And it really was the first time when someone said their screen was frozen. It legitimate was frozen. And then we had to work around, well, it's going to sound weird, we kind of need to defrost your laptop? What? Yeah, because you can't leave it in this cold weather for a while. Another unexpected thing that happens, D, this one's a little dark, but honestly, it happens in schools, it happens in our personal lives. Death is something. And I don't think anyone really plans for that. There isn't a, what do we do if a situation occurs? And this can be staff members, it can be a parent of a student. Unfortunately, from time to time, it's actually a student. And the other part is the people in our lives outside of work. Is that stuff that sometimes we bring in that we're not thinking about? And when this happens, I can honestly say we're not really focusing on getting a device back or worrying about anything like that at that moment in time. We're focusing on the people in these situations. It's that emotional safety, it's support, focusing on that. In some cases, reestablishing routines, because this is not a you get a replacement. This is a permanent change that affects many, many, many people. After a period of time, then you actually try to look at, all right, what are the changes we need to make? And in some cases, the changes, how do we just get access to files someone had so the person filling in for this teacher has what they need to get the students back in a routine and kind of get things reset back to normal. There are things like emergency events. This morning, I actually had a little notification on my phone that one of our fire alarms at work went off, and I think it's because we're doing some steam cleaning and someone forgot to put a cover over the little fire alarm part. But in the fire lens, this can be things like, how are we alerting people to let them know? Do we have ways to notify people who might be hard of hearing in a visual manner that you should respond to something? Severe weather, I had the privilege to be not too far away from a microburst when one of those popped through. So a big thunderstorm that kind of just blows up. And it blew out 3 6-foot by 10-foot windows. And obviously they were glass. And those are the events, again, it's like a little bit of physical safety. What do we do? All right, how do we notify people that you need to go seek shelter? How do you make sure it can reach as many people as possible? In the Midwest, blizzards, obviously. Things like school lockdowns. And that's where I go back to that paging thing I was saying earlier with a broken power supply. How do we notify people if someone hits a little button that says we need to do things like move away from windows? There's an emergency event. In that case, what we actually have is our analog bell system. We have our voice over IP phones. We use a product from Informacast Fusion that ties all these things together. So if someone hits a button, it turns into, we're going to use phones to do a broadcast. We're also going to do things like play it over a PA system. They look at physical safety as a priority. And with these, I focus here on, obviously, outcomes, physical safety. We definitely want to work on that. Change. What happens if you need to change the way in which you are dismissing or picking up students, maybe from a natural power outage that happens for an extended period of time? And then how do we iterate and make sure that that process actually worked out well? That reunification component of, like, there happens to be a big power outage and we can't really safely dismiss students. We're going to go take them to another location and do it from there. Parents need to know where their kids are and how to pick them up. Everyone needs to know the process for it all to work out. The other emergency event, I've talked about fires in the fire drill realm. Last year in the summer in Los Angeles, wildfires going through and burning buildings and schools. I don't know if you have a plan for our school gets burnt down. F, so related to emergency events, what about those false alarms? What about if somebody accidentally triggers a lockdown by accidentally hitting a button? Or, as we learned, if you have a power surge and you have something that has a monitoring circuit and it's looking for voltage over 2 wire pairs, what happens when the monitoring circuit comes up before the voltage is across the 2 pins? that indicates the same thing of a button was pressed. In those situations, how do you react and say, actually, please don't dispatch anything, everything's okay, how do we reset back to normal? And those false alarms are really great opportunities to test things out, to reflect. Did everyone get notifications that needed them? Did all of the systems work that were supposed to? And it's one of those weird ones, like these aren't fun to work with, but how do we do it better? Personally, for me, it turned into I'm just printing out the one thing that I need in my Google Documents, and I'm not going to worry about finding it. Where did I save it? It's in a folder that's in the front of my file cabinet that's bright red, and the label is highlighted with all this information. I've got another one that's in my laptop bag just because. I don't want to be thinking in events, what do I need to do? Because those events are already stressful enough. G, and this is going to be, I think, the last sad slide that we're going to talk about. What do you do when you have global pandemics, right? Incredibly quick transitions to remote learning. A lot of us, I think, had to deal with. How do you change a school year? Or how do you change Thursday we're in school, Monday you're all going to be doing this from Zoom at home? How is it easy for families to figure out where's the Zoom link that I need to do for which teacher? What happens if the link changes? How do we manage all of that information and not be it overwhelming for like families to figure out, I need to go find a Zoom link for my next class, but I don't want to log into this system and I don't want to check the email because then I might click the wrong one. So we just made an online web page that was, here's the building and here's all the Zoom links and just go to class. Starting a school year with remote learning is obviously something that's definitely an interesting situation, or the part of being in school 6 feet apart from everybody and not being able to teach students, like, here's how you work with facial reactions to read people because you just physically can't see. Is somebody smiling or are they frowning? And also, if you design with change in mind, whoops, we need to go from everything on-site to people at home. Are we set up for success? Will devices be filtered properly? Do we have a way that we can partner or send some education out to our parents so that they know, here's the expectation of how long kids should be on devices? Because we're on devices a lot. H, for hearing loss. Did anyone go to the accessibility session that was out here? All right, so there's some real awesome accessibility components built into iPhones, into Macs, to iPads. One of the things I've occasionally done at conferences is I'll throw my AirPods in, and if you're trying to have a conversation with somebody at a lunch table and there's 14 of you sitting at that table and it's a loud environment, sometimes it's hard to isolate what somebody's saying. And if you use Live Listen or something, you can place your iPhone or your device near them. It'll use that Bluetooth connection, and that works as a little bit of a microphone so you can actually be able to hear them in a slightly better way. This is one actually we probably all have a plan for. An internet outage. What do you do when that happens? Again, unexpected is more of about the when it happens. If it happens at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday in the summer, it's a little bit less of a priority than it happens at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. near a school dismissal time, and you need to think about that from that safety lens. So if you have an internet outage, what doesn't work in your environment? And if you've done anything with migrating to voice over IP, you know you probably don't have a way to make a phone call if you don't have a path out to make that connection. And our safety lens, when we were reflecting on this, is, well, we can actually handle that. We can communicate it. That's a big deal. But what we're more important about is what happens when somebody dials 911 and the internet happens to be out? Where does that call go? So we're lucky. The routers we have, a lot of the new ones now you can put cellular cards in and work on that. However, depending upon the structure of your schools, the age that they were built, sometimes rooms are kind of like Faraday cages because of wire mesh and plaster, or the server rooms where the internet's coming in was probably not put really close to a window. It's probably a spare closet that was somewhere in the building, in the basement, surrounded by a lot of brick. In our case, we have an analog phone line that sits in our router. Someone calls 911, it tries to go out the internet port, that doesn't work, it goes out an analog phone port. So that's a nice thing to have. Also, if you have systems that let you integrate and do things, again, specifically 911 in this case, how do you alert people to know that call was placed? Because that's something you want to have. You probably are also going to have a process administratively for call is placed, who are we notifying? How are we notifying them? I get an email, I get a text message, and my desk phone rings. And we picked all those options because what happens if I'm not at my desk to know? All right, well, I get 2 other notifications. What if I'm in a location that doesn't have a great cell signal? All right, well, I connected to the internet, so I can at least get a call this way. When we send that call over our analog line, we actually lose the ability to say, here is the specific room it came from. But our process is going to be, here's the people and our response plan. And yep, this person, the school nurse, go to the location, find out what happened. We don't need all of our secretaries in an office area to know about it. We can just use one ring group. Whoever picks it up is notified. Whoever picks that call up, it knows they're meeting someone at the front office to go take them to the room so the person responding doesn't have to figure out where is room 204. We can make that work. And then there's the other component here of the instructional lens. What happens when the internet goes out and we can't use our online tools? Hopefully, that's something that kind of can get built in a little bit towards, hey, when you're designing lesson plans and working on this might happen. Just kind of have a backup activity that you can pull out at any time and just say, oh, we're gonna pivot to this instead for the day. J was a little hard, so I had to get creative. A janky screen. This can be something that just is cracked, it doesn't look right. The projectors here, they're aligned really, really well. It's like, hey, this is in frame. I love it. What happens when they're not in frame and then someone comes back from winter break and they've been adjusted and they're kind of pivoting and leaning halfway across the screen? Or you look at it and it's a little crooked and you kind of start seeing, why is there a drywall screw out of the wall or the ceiling? How do you replace a projector, for example, that's ceiling mounted and it's 15 feet in the air? And then you get up there and you realize the installers, you used security screws. Okay, well, what bit is it? Do we have one? Those are always interesting experiences to have. K is gonna be for kernel panic. And I think for us in the tech land, we're okay with it. Like, just turn the computer off. It's not really a big deal. Honestly, an end user is a little scared about what just happened. Like, did I just get hacked? No, your computer just decided to freak out for whatever reason. And it's a big interruption to their routine. And it might not seem like a big deal, but computer restarts, comes back in, user logs in, and then they click yes to that dialog that says, your computer unexpectedly restarted. Do you want to reopen all of your previous windows? Sure, why not? I want to save time. And then the web browser of choice opens, and then it slowly starts going through the 38 tabs that they had open. And if you're a teacher and that happens, you might have a PowerPoint or Smart Notebook file that's trying to open. You might have a grade book. You might have 7 other things that are trying to happen. And you're trying to get back into your routine, and it's just not working because nothing's responding. And then you know what you do? You turn your computer off again. And then you repeat this process. And suddenly, it is 5 minutes later, and how do you refocus a class in that example is actually a challenging thing. L is going to be for legal issues. There are things that schools have to do. Internet filtering, there's student data privacy to worry about. And most of those are actually set up at a school board level, they're at a policy level, and hopefully those are things other than operating the system you don't have to do too much with. But there's also other obligations with Freedom of Information Act requests. If you have a person that is handling that, are they actually a 12-month employee? Are they going to be here to respond to something if no one's here? What are things related to student records, if we have to worry about that? Is it anything that they've created? Is it emails that a teacher mentioned? Does it include their digital tools? That might be everything in Google Workspace or O365 or the content of their iCloud drive. Or does it also need to include data that might be in third-party systems that are linked through single sign-on that now data lives over there and you have to worry about? What I will say with these first two, if I ever have to do anything that is responding to requests based upon FOIA information or even student record stuff, I actually just keep another piece of paper that sits in a file cabinet, and these are the filters that I use. This was the process that I followed to do a thing. I've never had to worry about being subpoenaed to do anything along these lines. I will probably never remember if someone asked, what were your search filters for this content that was responsive to our request a year ago? I have no idea what I did a year ago. I don't even know usually the process I did for something 2 weeks ago. So in these cases, these are great things to document. It also means you have something you can potentially hand off to someone else if they take on that responsibility. And then the other interesting legal issues that are kind of unexpected is what happens when there's a parent, a family member who can no longer pick up their student from school for whatever reason. How do we notify people? All right, do we actually need to let the entire school community know, hey, so-and-so can no longer pick up this person? Probably not. And just on the privacy lens, I personally am like, this feels icky. Not everyone needs to know information. Let's not share more information than's needed. But then what happens if you have student dismissal where a parent has to come in to check out a student? Okay, well, that building person, whoever it is, maybe it's a security individual, maybe it's just a front office staff member, needs to know, hey, this thing can't happen anymore. So if you're using a visitor management system, for example, find a way that you can do these customized alerts. The other one we get in schools is sometimes the secretary goes on vacation. Sometimes people just get sick. How does the person that's a substitute actually have the same access to that information? So those are kind of some of those unexpected, changes to just a non-tech process that we actually see in our schools. M is for misplaced device. I'm sure, has everyone here misplaced a device at some point? Like you lose your iPhone in the couch and you can't figure out where the heck it went. We've run into this a lot where a device gets misplaced in the school. And I will 100% say this is something where that little blue box talking about iterating and reflecting and trying to be more efficient / lazier turned into a really cool solution. So we would get, student, I lost my iPad. Can you put it into lost mode? Okay, so you put it into lost mode, and if you're lucky, you kind of hear the Apple rendition of I just can't get enough for that lost mode sound. And unfortunately, most of the time what happens is that person comes in and like, hey, I haven't been able to find my iPad for like 2 days, and I think the battery was really low. In the best case scenario, you go to your wireless controller, you maybe get the MAC address, and you say, show me where this thing device is connected, and somehow it has been sitting on like 1% for 2 days, and you can actually tell them, here's where it is. What if it's not connected? And then that's an entire mess of where was this device in the past? And that was the challenge we were aiming to solve here with how do we find a student's device that the battery died on in our building and we can't put it into lost mode? So we looked at actually some tools that are out there for using the Jamf API, and we pull out a list. We get the user's name, and we get the MAC address of their iPad. And then we actually go over to our wireless controller, and we use some SNMP tools, and we get a CSV file that show me MAC address and the MAC address of the associated access point. And then we get another CSV file through SNMP that's show me the MAC address of the access point and give me the access point name. Now through Bash, let's join some information and give me a file at the end that shows me a student name, the MAC address of their iPad, the MAC address of the access point it's connected to, and the access point name. That's really, really helpful, but it's that moment in time. So you cron this, and you say, run this thing every 15 minutes. So give me my list of inventory. We run that one just once a day because I don't need to make more API calls than are needed. I also know that once a day, I think I can pull in access point MAC addresses. Those really aren't changing too often. We get this file, we use Logstash, Kibana, Elasticsearch, and we say, hey, pull this list up and drop a file here, and anytime this file changes, read the contents. And then we take this, and it's a little dark to see here, but now we have a list of here's the student, here's the MAC address of their iPad, and here's the access point it was connected to we keep the data for 2 weeks in 15-minute intervals. So when this student says, I don't know where my iPad is, you can actually look from the bottom up here and see, well, it started out in room 204, and then it moved to the access point number 1 in the cafe, and then it's been sitting in room L22, and it hasn't connected there since July 11th. So your iPad's probably close by that room because you said the battery was dead. And it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to find a device that's offline, but it will at least tell somebody, you have a zone. You've got like 3 or 4 classrooms here, maybe 1 level up. Here's how we can help you find a device. Misplaced at home. Again, I've done that one. It's somewhere in the house. The plus side is at least the somewhere in a house sound that an iPad makes is not the same thing of like the CO2 sensor saying it's time to change the battery at 3 a.m., but it only pings every 8 minutes. So you're walking around at 2 a.m., come on, is it on this floor? Okay, maybe this one. Okay, I'm on the right floor. I need to go wait and see which room it's in. We've had people misplace them at the park, and that happened to only work out well with lost mode and being able to pull in those geographic coordinates. It was a nice day. I put into lost mode. I walked over to the park from my office and kind of, it's like, oh, there's this thing that's beeping in the tunnel slide. I don't know why it's there, but it's coming back with me. We have had them misplaced in an airline seat, and we did indeed get it back, which was incredibly exciting. I was trying to go find the iPad that was misplaced in Hawaii. Work did not let me do it, unfortunately. And that one, we never got back. We don't know the last time it was online. We said, we're just going to wipe this. We're going to lock it down, put it into a different pre-stage enrollment in Jamf so that it's a little more pushy to tell people, my enrollment customization says lost iPad reported by school district, and it needs a username and password from the school district to sign in. You're probably not going to be able to do anything with that. And then we've also had them misplaced in another country. And again,
losing these at different places like this.
I wish it was me. I just lose them at home. I try not to bring work iPads when I'm traveling to other places. This is a fun one. It's not working. Okay, what is, can you tell me a little bit more other than my computer is not working? And some of those are that situation of getting to the bottom of the issue is probably the hardest. And how do you describe something that you don't really know? So has anyone here ever played like a new involved board game or a new video game? Anyone? No? Okay, good. If it's really complex and you get a lot of rules and it's new to you and other people know all the dynamics, you're stuck like, I don't even know how to ask you the question because I don't know enough. And that was a spot where I was thinking about, our teachers. Not everyone's really comfortable with technology. I'm not super comfortable trying to describe mechanical issues with my car other than it makes this sound and it's kind of over here, or in some cases, hey, my window's broken. That one's easy. So, those lenses, occasionally you get that spot of, it's not working. Well, tell me a little bit more. Remembering that people at the end of the day who are using these things, and not everyone has the same comfort level with what we do. Objects stuck in ports. 3.5 millimeter audio connections are my current one that we get the most of, and I'm really looking forward to no longer having 3.5 millimeter audio connections on iPads when we do our device refresh in a year. I also am not looking forward to telling a bunch of people, hey, you need to buy some new headphones. USB-C connectors, we've had those that you get a laptop back and the power supply and say it's not working. And at least my computer's not charging. And then you see that the USB cable's kind of at a little bit of an angle. Like, all right. HDMI cables. We used to have 25-foot long HDMI cables, and we were starting to really get tired of having to rerun 25-foot HDMI cables because somebody put something in front of a connection box and they broke the HDMI end in. So we said, how do we do this better? And our solution was we buy a 16-foot HDMI extender cable. We buy a 6-foot HDMI cable. And when something breaks, we're replacing 6 feet, which is probably really, really accessible and not having to run cabling through whichever paths that they have to be within our schools. All right, who thinks they know what P is going to be? It's not. I'm not. We're not even going to touch printers. Instead, we're going to go to power outages. Power outages, similar to those internet outages, think of that safety and security lens, except here, what's going to turn offline when the power goes out? That's usually a little bit different than the internet's out, because that's going to be things like we have voice over IP phones. Do we want to make sure those are powered on? What do we think about our access points? Now that all of our students and our teachers have mobile devices with batteries that really aren't impacted by there's a power outage, we have to sometimes change what we're doing a little bit to reflect the devices that the people are using. So our school nurses, our secretaries that are using iMacs, let's put a battery backup on your computer to make sure if the power is out and there is some kind of an event where we have to look up students' allergies, the school nurse can still do that. Someone in the office can still answer phone calls if there's a power outage and actually be able to look up information. Q. There's really not a lot of options here for Q. That's another tough one. So this is just questionable damage. That's that unexpected event if someone says, at least this time, my device doesn't turn on. They don't say it's not working. And then sometimes you investigate these and you find 5 o'clock somewhere did indeed happen. This one is my favorite. My favorite that I worked with is there was a student that was actually in our accelerated math program that was saying, well, my screen shattered on my iPad. Oh, what happened? Well, the bus hit a bump and it cracked my screen. Only your screen? Yeah, because I was sitting over the wheel. All right. If you can give me the equation that will tell me the amount of force that you were able to take by only you, it's like the Simpsons thing with Aurora Borealis at this time of the year in this location, localized to your kitchen. And then the weird things of just okay, I know it's wine, but can you just say what happened? This is where we have to, again, remember, all right, let's not focus on the details here of someone spilled this weird thing happened. The outcome we want to make sure we kind of push ourselves back to, all right, I want to make sure you have a working device. The steps that we got there of how it doesn't turn on or why the screen is cracked doesn't really matter. Let's just get you back to where you should be. In R, the unexpected event that happens here or can happen is ransomware. And in those cases, you're doing things like we want to focus on isolating the device as our main outcome. And we've actually used these opportunities to talk to people and say, let's bring the concept of social engineering up. I'm pretty sure your school principal is not going to send you an email that says, hey, I'm stuck in a meeting and I need you to get me gift cards. It's kind of like if you've ever gotten the text message that says, you have unpaid tolls, go here to pay them. Let's talk about the social engineering parts that are here. There's a component that is focused on a sense of urgency. It just feels fishy and weird. In those cases, follow up with people out of band in the method in which they first contacted you. And I had our HR person one day give me a call and say, oh, I sent you the ACH change information to change direct deposit. What? What are you talking about? I don't know. I don't know what this is. Oh, well, you sent me an email about it. Well, all right, hold on. Let's pause. Let's go take a look at it. And that was a great opportunity to kind of share, well, the social engineering parts here are, that's not my email address, and here's how if you hover over it, you can see it. You and I have conversed over email for 13 years. Have I ever signed an email this way? And then you can turn those into actually hey, by the way, we're going to go share out with our school community things to keep an eye on and reinforce our procedures of what we would do. That's why our HR folks I will physically interoffice a piece of paper to you. You physically need to interoffice it back. Please don't send it digitally. Because it is very easy to have an email address that looks like someone else requests that information, and suddenly your paychecks, who know where they go? The other lens, I think, from ransomware that's in here is data protection. If someone gets access to your data, or if you use a certain student information system that rhymes with, well, if you use a certain student information system that had some publicity about having a data breach, those are great opportunities to look at and say, what data are we actually collecting, and do we need it all, right? Is there any reason a school would need to track things like social security numbers? I don't know. If you don't need to do it, limit that data footprint, so if someone gets access to a device, if they're able to export a bunch of your data in an unintended way, you haven't given more information than what is needed. S is going to be for siblings. We've had students that they accidentally have swapped iPads with their older or younger sibling. So there was one of our students actually accidentally brought their older sibling's high school iPad over. And they're getting ready to go take notes in math class, and the notes that they see in Notability, so we're using the same thing, are calculus. And this kid's like, what is this? Oh, oops, I took the wrong one. We also had somebody that borrowed a device, I guess I would say to test and see if we filter the same way that their school does. In Illinois, typically our K-8 school districts are separate from our high school districts. If you're more rural, you get the consolidated K-12, but high school district blocks certain content. We also block certain content, and we can indeed say that the same content was indeed blocked on both devices, and then that became something that we could hand off to say, this is student discipline, you please worry about it. This might be my favorite. It's the home stretch on these. T's for trash day. It is kind of related to siblings a little bit. This was during our remote learning era, and obviously devices are around. They're out and about all the entire time. Younger sibling was helping out with chores. Things got rearranged. The iPad happened to be in the pile of here's the newspapers and the stuff that we have to recycle because it was being cleaned, and that iPad ended up going into the garbage. Now, we treated that as, well, this is still a lost device, and we thank the family so much for being honest. It's like, so we've spent the entire weekend looking for this device. I think this is what happened. U is going to be for user error. Occasionally, everything is indeed working fine. And there's a great image I found that this reminds me of, and it's this one. It's kind of an or. You usually can't be happy and right, and this is a perfect situation where more recently I've been realizing, in tech land we're really just focused on stuff a lot, and we can do a little better with people. And I have used these opportunities when you go into a room and you try to fix something because you're the closest person to help out, and you realize, it's just going to plug in your HDMI cable there. Cool, you're up and going. Oh, what was it? And you have that mental pause of, do I say that I plugged it in? Do I come up with a crafty solution? Do I say, oh, I just did a power management reset, restarting? And in those circumstances, I've just been like, oh no, HDMI cable was unplugged. But don't worry about it. I spent 15 minutes one day trying to connect to a projector, swapped out 4 different cables, and I realized I didn't put the connector together. And it made that person just feel so much at ease. And I think the other part sometimes that we can forget is there's a lot of emotional baggage that comes with people to work, and something else can be happening in their life that they're just frazzled and not focused on. And that might be the thing that they just can't handle at that moment. So I did mention hearing loss. We're also going to go to vision loss because we want to make sure that anyone that maybe needs a device has that. I had somebody pop to me and say, we need to get this student a big iPad Pro. Oh, what do they need it for? I just want to make sure that we're good with it. And then you find out, oh, there's a condition that at some point they're just going to be blind. We can't tell you when. It's just going to happen, and we want to make this as easy as possible. And in that case, you focus on the little outcome box down there of, oh my gosh, of course. Here you go. I'm not going to worry about that. But it also is account to all of the accessibility components that exist on devices. And has anyone here used shortcuts before? A little bit? This is a really great shortcut to look at. So if you go to shortcuts in the gallery at the bottom, there's going to be a banner up for accessibility. There's an iPhone, iPad, and Mac accessibility assistant that will give you a list of here are some things you can actually say, you know what? Some days, like I actually am a little bit sensitive to light, or in certain situations, I can't necessarily do a thing. You run the shortcut, it'll create a note that then goes through, here's all the accessibility settings that are focused around the thing that you just mentioned from our Apple accessibility site. So that's a great way to discover lots of new things that are out there that you might not necessarily know about. W. All right, I'll try to wrap up here because I know it's right before lunch and it's a full day. W's for water. This is definitely something we see in life, keeping water where it should be. Water bottles do indeed spill at times, even though they're sealed when they're in a bag. The other thing that you sometimes run into is water can come into buildings from roof leaks. They can come in through, it's been a really humid couple of days and our condenser unit is just, it's done. And you get the condensation from that. So how do you handle when water leaks in the ceiling onto a projector or onto a smartboard or something else? How do we replace a thing damaged by water? Again, we're focused on the outcome. We just want to make sure this works. If it's going to take 30 minutes to an hour to replace, you have to work with a teacher to actually find out what time works. All right, X. X is going to be for social media platforms because the impact of social media that we see in classroom environments and depending upon the developmental age of students, peer pressure, all of that, is something that we probably don't necessarily expect. We don't expect, oh, there's going to be a new TikTok challenge that's focused on what you should do to the paper towel dispensers in schools. Great. These platforms amplify messaging. They make it really easy for things to hit more people than they should. They also allow for cyberbullying. So we want to make sure when we're teaching students about new tech tools, you know how to use it ethically, how to use them responsibly. You also have to worry about FOMO. You know, you're a high school student, you're a junior high school student, and you see that selfie of like 13 of your best friends at a concert that you weren't invited to and you thought you were their best friends. It's tough to think about as an adult, oh, why does that bug me? Kids that are 12 or 13, that's a significant thing to worry about. And another one, this is newish, AI-generated images. That is an entire thing that is way too easy to type in, put this person's photo in here, and ChatGPT, go do your magic. How do you change things when you need to block these platforms? Or how do you make them accessible to the correct people that have the responsibility to keep an eye on things that are happening on social media in the classroom environments? Y is not YouTube. Y is going to be for, you know what, you make a mistake. I've made a mistake. At one point in the summer, I said, oh, I'm going to go install this wireless update because there's like 4 people in the building, and I just want to get it done. And probably about 10 minutes after I started that, my superintendent, who was in another building with 5 other school administrators, was saying, hey, our wireless just dropped, and we're in the middle of trying to do the teacher-mandated training we need to do to re-up our administrative certifications. Oops. Hey, oh, yeah, I'm sorry, that was me. Sometimes, remember, you can be humble, you can be human, recognize that mistakes do indeed happen. And when you do those, you can follow up in a way, I think, that people like by saying, hey, the update's done, you should be able to get back online. I should have done this thing, and here's what I will do to make sure it doesn't happen again. It takes 30 seconds, and if you reflect upon, like, yeah, I ran an update because I didn't see that anybody was in this building, but I really should have just reached out and asked if I could do it, and you know what, if I'm doing one again in the future, I'll make sure I check in with a couple of you before I do it. That person's going to be like, cool, you've addressed the problem, you let me know it's fixed, and here's the steps you're going to take to prevent it from happening again. And then we're going to wrap up with Z for being 0 day. What happens when there is a high security issue recognized by the industry, when your browser of choice that updates twice or 3 times a week has a vulnerable patch, or Mac OS has a very vulnerable patch? How do you get that in place of the devices as quickly as needed? And where I want to wrap this up, because I think it's a great way to put this all together, the other 0 day you have are what are your local issue 0 days? What are the events that are critically important that you want to make sure you're thinking about when you review this kind of framework of focusing on outcomes, change in mind, ways to undo what you're doing, and how to iterate and reflect. Every group, every organization, every school district is probably going to have a thing that they say is a really high priority to work on. And if you can identify that and kind of take these 4 slides to put a nice wrapper around it, you can probably do a really good job. Our project that we have coming up is changing our student information system. And I am 100% going to focus on all of those. If anyone is interested in presenting next year, and maybe you have a project like switching an MDM server, being able to say, hey, here's the stuff we used in macOS 26 that's coming out. Here's how we leveraged it, and here's how it all worked. That'd be a great session. So if you have that project, I would say, hey, take some notes down, and I think you would have a great story to tell for a lot of people that are here. So with stories to tell, since there is about 19 minutes left, do any of you have fun stories that fall into that A to Z category of just completely unexpected things that you've had to deal with? Okay, all right. We're going to take advantage of the catch box. I'm going to move a little this way to avoid the water, because you saw W is one of those slides. We definitely don't want that to come on up again.
So very slightly long and complicated story, but we had a first grade class that was doing some research on iPads. They were using a school-approved Wikipedia-esque thing that was hosting Google Ads. That, I think most of you
Hey, it's for advertisements.
Yes. Very, in my opinion, nefarious ad that was just a gray box that said, click here to continue. And what 6-year-old is not going to finish reading the article they're reading and say, oh, okay, and click the button that took them to a very hardcore website, and we'll leave it at that. Fortunately, the student who was the most directly affected by this was the daughter of a teacher at the school. And so there was, a nice little moment of like, okay, it could have been way worse. But where I kind of want to open it up for any potential opinions is, we addressed the situation in the moment as best we could. We, removed that platform from our link tree that the students can access. I sent a report to that website to say like, hey, you guys are hosting ads that are leading to very bad things for small children to have access to. Did not hear back from the platform, so that was really encouraging. But it has since led to a larger discussion at the admin level that my initial takeaway was the reaction was, oh my God, we cannot have technology in any of our classrooms ever. And I'm like, that's the pendulum's going a little too far there, guys. Like we live in an age where, yes, we need to be responsible with our usage, but we can't just say, no, the kids are never allowed to touch an iPad again. So I guess where my brain goes here is what's the human aspect of that? How do you have that conversation of you're being too reactionary and things are going to happen, but like explaining that to admin and stakeholders in a way that then, doesn't let everyone off the hook, but presents the situation. Yeah, this is a fun one that we've been dealing with for a while, so.
I feel like
Yeah.
So do you have, I'm sure that you do, but in your user agreement that everybody would get or the parents would sign off on, is that approached at all? That you take best case, or, you take the best possible care to avoid that type of thing, but anything can happen? Is there any kind of statement that basically says, we try our best, but we might not hit it, beyond our control?
Yeah, so I'm not directly responsible for that aspect of it. I believe that language is there, and certainly since this incident has happened, that has been on the forefront of the admin and my boss, and they've been, reviewing and revising all of that information to make sure that it is fully up to date. Outside of that, I mean, what we found was that the websites that were being linked to from these ads were not classified correctly, where they should have been caught by our firewall, obviously, and were not. And we worked with our managed network services to update those policies to hopefully prevent this from happening in the future. But it has still led to that sort of, ultra reactionary kind of burn it all down response versus having, coming from it from a place of it needs to be a more nuanced discussion about how we deal with this and how we manage it. And certainly those are still ongoing in our organization. We haven't made a decision one way or the other, and nothing has directly changed yet. But I know that that is going to be, over the next year, a major part of like meetings that I'll be having with those admins of like, how do we limit usage? And I don't know that they're coming at it from the place that they should be.
Gosh, there's a lot of ways. Like, okay, there's web filtering. There's stuff you could do with like Apple Classroom so that the teacher can kind of guide lessons, and that can be some of those components that are what's the age appropriateness of these things. Education on, well, hey, look, we're probably at some point. What do you do when you run across unexpected content as the student, as a user? This is just a life skill of, oh, that isn't what I expected. Let's put that away. Most of mine in those situations probably go back towards do we have all the processes in place that are going to do their best effort to do what they need to do? We know stuff will change. It's like if someone's playing music, is it the explicit version of the song or is it the regular one? Sometimes those things happen, or just the ads that pop up on YouTube. Like, whoa, that's a little questionable. I can't control it. Are we going to say now we're not going to use the YouTube platform when there's educational content, or there's other tools like Khan Academy that are referencing content on YouTube? So those are those. Look,
As much as we like to try to control things with technology, we have to understand that this is a person problem, and everybody has to be on board with that.
Yeah.
Period. Things cannot be always handled by technology.
Yeah.
Nor should they.
And I think the IT people understand that. It's the translating that into a way that,
Or people problem that we need to, yes.
Right.
Get those people understood.
yeah.
now, are we using too many digital? I mean, honestly, this is something we've been doing this last year. Is post-COVID, where everything was digital, we started looking at, all right, how long are our kids on certain websites? What are the tools that we're using? Do we, in general, just actually want to make tech usage more intentional and have it be, hey, it's available when you want to use it, but let's maybe do some math worksheets on paper and not try to use a stylus and annotate them. So I think that can be one of those bits that can even go towards like, what are strategic priorities that we want to focus on, and how do we make the usage of technology fit those strategies and long-term goals than just the reactionary part.
Yeah.
It's not as important, I guess I should say. It's more of a, I find it funny. So we are a Chromebook district, but all of our staff has MacBooks. And being the Mac admin, I don't really deal with the kids' devices much, which is coming into this, I was like, oh, it's not going to be too bad. No. So the story, this is just last year. I had a teacher at our high school that was out on vacation for a week, came back. Oh, my screen was broken while I was gone. Okay, what happened? Oh, my dog stepped on it.
Animals.
Going back to your animals. I was like, oh, that's wonderful. Okay, get you a loaner device. I'll come pick it up. We have Apple Care. Send it out via GSX. I'm just gonna say this isn't exactly the cleanest person. The device was spotless. That was confusing to me. I was like, I've seen your room. I've worked on your device before. I was like, oh, something else happened here. It wouldn't turn on or anything. Send it out via GSX, comes back. Or before it comes back, they send me a picture. GSX does. I get an email from them. They're like, oh, there's spill damage inside the device. The dog didn't step on it. It peed on it. That's all. That's the fun.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones that I think we all like have that story of. Like we'll work on the iPads for kindergartners or first graders, and it's like that screen is just so speckled with sneeze.
Oh yeah.
How has this not been cleaned? So actually, we iterated on that and we reflected and said this is just gross. When we do our devices over the summer and handle everything with updating, hey, the folks that were giving you high school summer jobs, please also clean the screens and keyboards. It's like it also isn't a great look. You start the school year and you're like, what happened on this? That's just ick. Well, I'll throw this slide up here, so if there's anyone that has some feedback, you can scan the QR code. I would love to know, hey, was this informative? Was it fun? If there's things you would like to hear, it definitely guides kind of the stuff that I'll do. If anyone wants to stick around, there's still technically 9 minutes until the session's done, but again, I think everyone's brains are probably pretty full from the conference already, so thank you for tuning in and listening and hopefully laughing and sharing along. And get home safe!